Yo, so I am going to go over this mix that I did a little while ago, a few months ago, called Listen to Your Inner Voice by the artist Luise. And I just love this song. Love this song. I don't know why I dropped the F bomb, like it's a great song. And the production by Mihai, Ristea is unbelievably good. Phenomenal producer, one of my favorite people on the planet, and just all-round great guy. So yeah, I love this tune. I loved it when he sent it to me. The mix was already good, and I just kind of was there to make it sound even better, I suppose. And that's one of the good things working with Mihai. He's always got really, really good sound selection, and he has a good ear for mixing anyway. So when I get the projects, I'm able to work on like really fine details and just making stuff sound pristine. Anyway, here's a little bit of how the song sounds. My bad, I missed the initial vocal part, but whatever. Vibes. Crazy nice vocals. And already you can kind of see how I have everything organized. Got like 4 main folders: drums, bass, instruments, vocals. I also have a couple of sends, but really not that many, as you might expect, or as I might expect. Usually I have more than that, but in this case, a lot of the instruments were kind of taken care of already. The effects were taken care of already, so I just didn't really have to add that much extra. So yeah, I'll walk you through how I've got it organized. Got the kick drums just on its own. It's such a huge, important element, and I think you can hear in the mix, you know, it's prominent. Then I've got some extra stuff that I added myself, I believe. I've got this clap, I've got hi-hats, this is snare click. I think it's just a sample that just kind of has some more click in it to bring the snare out more. This, I think, is like percussion, or maybe a parallel compression send or something like that, but it sounded good and it didn't work when I took it out, so kept it. Bass. This is probably, in every project I do, the most complicated thing, and it's where most of the manual automation and editing comes in. I didn't have to edit the bass on this one, but there were like 3 different bass sounds, and to get them all sounding consistent was kind of tough. But obviously one of the ways to get started with that is putting them all through the same bus and processing them that way. So I had other stuff that I tried adding, and when I sent it back, Mihai just wasn't that into it. So they're muted. Did manage to get one little clicky sample in on the bass just to give it a little more prominence. Higher bass synth, mid bass, I think, which is switched off, and then the outro bass is in its own little group. Not sure, I don't remember why, but I'm assuming I've processed them differently. Yeah, that's low, and the other one will be mids and highs. Frequencies, for people who don't know what I'm talking about, mid and high frequencies. Bass fills, they didn't even need treated, they were fine. So instruments, this is where it's probably the busiest. Just lots of really good layers, effects, all kinds of things, chords. I just put everything into one bus. There weren't that many different patches for like the chords. There's maybe 3, I think. So you got like this Rhodes keys, you got brass keys, you got outro chords, maybe a pad. Usually what I would do is actually group all of the chords in the one group. and process them together, just so I have a folder that just says chords, then I have a folder that just says melodies, and I sort of treat those differently. But in this case, it didn't really feel like it needed, they didn't overlap it too much, and I just didn't do that. But I thought it was worth mentioning. Vocals, also quite a few channels, but not all of them needed much treatment. They were all pretty well taken care of by Mihai already. I think probably what I did the most of on the vocals was like taking out harsher frequencies and balancing sort of mid frequencies where they needed it. This is literally just doing a filter and then soothe to kind of clean it up. But I often find this on tracks with Mihai, I really don't need to do a lot to the vocals. Usually if I touch it too much, it just ends up not really doing what I wanted to do. This one added a little bit of convolution reverb to give it some room and some saturation. But as you can see, a lot of these just don't have anything done to them. Yeah, I did a low cut and I did another low cut. That's about it. So I guess I'll walk through what I actually would look at when I'm first getting a track. And the very first thing is like the bass elements. I actually look at the waveforms, and the reason for that is like you can see quite clearly like information just from the waveform. Like you can literally read it. And what I can see is that this kick drum starts off a little quieter than it ends up. It kind of has like a slow sort of, it's not slow, obviously this happens very quickly, but you know, it rises and falls in volume. So I instantly know I'll probably want to adjust that and see if I can get more volume out of the start of it so that the kick really, you know, is emphasized. I always like to, like with drums, and this was a track where I overdid it on the first take, but what I like to do is really get the drums to a point where they're as forward as they possibly can be and then pull it back, because I feel like doing that is to me just like more powerful. I'd rather have them too far forward and be able to bring them back than not be able to get them further forward. So I just try my best to push them as hard as I can, just because it forces you to clean them up and like make sure there's no harsh frequencies or weird clicks or anything. First thing I should note is that it's going to my drum distortion bus, which I will just play in solo. Very quiet. But this has basically got a transient shaper, which is something that will like push the initial click or transient of the drum. And if you want, it'll pull down all the other stuff. It will also pull down the click and push up the other stuff if you want, but I've added attack, pump and sustain kind of do the same thing. They just pull down, you know, you can see what it's doing with this shape. It's like the initial hit gets pushed up, it gets flatlined a bit because this pump kind of pulls this down, and then it goes down completely at the end because the sustain is all the way down, see? So then it's got this rectifier distortion, which as far as I understand what a rectifier does, and I don't know if this actually is doing it, but rectifier is taking every rectifiers, I don't need to talk about it. Then I've got some distortion, I've got some more transient shaping, so this is really like distorting and just making like what you can hear, these little clicks, right? They're really powerful. A compressor is basically letting through the first 10 milliseconds of audio, and after that it's pushing everything down. So basically this is just doing the same thing but in a kind of more dynamic way that is a bit less intense, I guess. It's kind of, I'm trying to do the same thing but let the compressor kind of take care of it on it in its own way, because people are sort of used to listening to compressors more so than transient shapers, I think. I feel like people's ears like compressors more, but I wanted the effect of the transient shapers in there. So then I'm kind of just cutting out like harsh frequencies. If I play this, you'll hear what I cut out. Just little like hissy sounds, not necessary. Bass. It's kind of weird resonance sound. So basically all that's doing is just adding a little bit of extra spice to the drums, and just for a second every time they click. So it's one of those things, I can hear it, but I don't think everybody would be able to hear. Very subtle difference. It just pulls the drums forward, I think, and just makes them a little bit more consistent. If I turn this up a lot, now you can hear the difference a lot, right? If I turn that off. So basically what I would do is put that as loud as possible and then just turn it down until I thought it sounded good. And that's what I did do. So anyway, snare click, let's go over that. This is literally probably just a snare sample that I found. It actually looks like a kick. Maybe I used the initial kick drum from the track and just put that over the, oh, someone's texting me. Leave me alone. Oh, I'm so popular. And yeah, basically, I think I just wanted the snare to have the same texture when it hit as the kick drum. Not completely, I don't think it's as loud, but I just wanted it to be there so there's some consistency. Then clap. It's actually kind of a snare, but it has like a clap layer. And you can sort of see, so this is a channel that is turned off, but I think I recorded out what it looks like. So you can see here, you've got like a little click before the snare drum hits. And that's kind of like the effect you get when a few people are clapping, right? Like if one person claps, it doesn't really sound that good over a snare drum. You want the effect of like a few different people doing it. And you can see in these waveforms too, it's like one here on the left, one on the right, another one on the right, and another one on the left, and then the snare drum hits. So it sounds like, you know, four people going like, you know. And that might seem like, to someone who actually knows about music production, that might seem kind of boring and meaningless, but it kind of presented a problem with this track, and that is basically what I wanted to do was push the bass in the snare forward a little bit, because I just felt like looking at the waveform, I just see like, you know, this nice wavy, like fat bassy thing, but like here I just didn't really see that much of it, and I wanted more. It feels like it's overpowered by the higher frequencies, which are the ones, you know, making these like smaller squiggly lines. So I was like, can I get more out of that? And the answer is yes. But the difficulty was with this stuff beforehand. If I used a transient shaper, which I did, then it was gonna like activate when this stuff comes in and not necessarily when this came in. So, I mean, that's not entirely true. Sometimes it'll do both. And as it turns out, that's what it did. But I tried it out, and usually this would suck and I wouldn't like it, but it worked. On this occasion, it worked. I mean, there's no rules as to what you should or shouldn't do, but it worked. So if you listen to it, you can hear that like click beforehand is really pronounced. But the reason there's two of these here, you have one that is not really that affected. And the reason for that is I have cut out all the frequencies below 250 hertz, which is where that like is going to come from in the snare. So this is all just texture, and then I've distorted it, not very much, but a little bit, and that just kind of brings it up a little bit, it kind of like amplifies the detail. It also gets rid of some of it, but it's not turned at 100% strength. It's at like 38%. So a lot of it is just the original signal. So this one is all of the signals below 250 hertz. And you hear that little click just before it goes boop. It's like boop. Weird. But it worked. And I think I added a transient shaper and then another transient shaper. And I think they probably have clip mode enabled so that, you know, it just flatlines the signal and it doesn't create this massive spike. But somehow it adds more power to it. Then here, yep, just a big old boost to just get this really pronounced kind of like bass. And I guess I wanted to take out some of this frequency. Just didn't like it, I suppose. And you end up with a pretty fat snare drum. What have I done after that? I've cut out some low frequencies, adjusted the texture up here minimally, taken in some of the stereo information, I guess. Yeah, I just pulled down some of the stereo information and added a little bit of convolution just to make it sound like it's in a different room, and then turned that down. I don't remember where that was initially set at. Oh, and then I clipped it. Did I even clip it? Nope, I had a clipper there, but I didn't even use it. So I guess I must have tried it and given up. So basically that combined with this click gives this really kind of forward, snappy, clicky snare. And then when you play the kick alongside it, they kind of work. And then all the drums together. There's not really much happening, but it all works. The hi-hats, usually I don't have to do much to the hi-hats. Mihai, again, like I say, picks really good samples. I cut out some of the low frequencies because it was a bit rumbly. See that blue on the bottom left? I don't know if I'm pointing the right way with the camera or whatever, but that, you don't need it. It's in like every video anyone ever says about production, but you really do not need that low frequency in your hi-hats. The less of that kind of stuff you have building up elsewhere, the easier it is for your bass and kick to really like shine. Yeah, so I guess that's what I did with the drums. There's not much else other than some multiband compression. I kind of just wanted to, I didn't want to like pull out those frequencies in the mids, but I didn't want them to be there for as long. Like when I listen to this, I can hear, and maybe other people can, I don't know. I just feel like I hear a lot of like, and that kind of sound lives in this range. And I want that in the sound, I just didn't want it for as long. I didn't want it to be like, I just wanted like, you know? Another thing that's important to mention, I have this NLS, which like does a good job at emulating virtual mix racks or virtual mixers. I don't know what a mix rack or a mixer really is. I mean, I've never used one in real life. That's a lie, actually, I did, but I didn't really know what I was doing. But it's like those old school things you see in like recording studios, the big tables with like faders and knobs and stuff. They all have a specific sound. When you use them, like they add the signals together in a specific way, which doesn't happen when you use just a normal computer, and this kind of emulates that, and it adds a little bit of drive. And pro tip for anyone on your drums, this mic setting on Wave's NLS channel, it just sounds nice on drums. Very little difference, but a lot of the process is just adding little bits, and then eventually it all makes like a huge difference. But it's worth talking about this because I have it on everything. I think at the end of the bass there is also NLS. Instruments and vocals, they don't seem to have it, but I'm willing to bet some of them do. Nope. Well, I just lost that bet. So let's move on. Instruments. Bells detuned. Let's go through it. What have I got here? Very nice. So I think if I remember, this one just had a little bit too much, how do I say this? The lowest frequency, like, so if you look at any sound, like this doesn't have any, this isn't doing anything to the sound right now, but like, you can see here, there's like different spikes, right? on this. So those are all harmonics for people who don't know. This one is the lowest, so it's like the fundamental tone that's being played. Everything else is just adding to the texture or the tone or the timbre, whereas this is the actual pitch or the frequency. And I just felt like that was slightly too loud compared to the rest of the sound. I wanted more texture from this rather than the pitch of the note. I mean, you'd still hear the pitch, but these frequencies can create resonances later on in the process. And I use a lot of like saturation and things like that when I'm mixing. So I basically just didn't want that saturation to push the fundamental note, the fundamental frequency up even further, because that low spike is typically the loudest out of all of the other spikes you see on that wave, on that frequency spectrum. And so because it's the loudest, like a little bit of distortion is going to push that more than other ones. So because I knew I was going to distort the track a little bit, saturate it, let's say, I wanted to pull it down just slightly. So like, I say slightly, actually half the volume almost. So yeah, you know, I did what needed done. Once again, there's a lot of like this low frequency stuff happening down here. And although it's probably really quiet, it's just better to just not have it there. So I took that out. This is just taking out some resonances. I feel like I haven't spoken about Soothe much because it just does its own thing. I think this is the default preset. I didn't do anything with it. It just takes out harsh frequencies. And honestly, in this case, it wasn't even taking out much. I made this wider with Wider by Polyverse. It's like the best plugin in terms of like, it just does what it says on the tin. It just makes stuff sound wider. Like if you have headphones on right now, check this. Suddenly it feels like it's like coming from the sides. So yeah, it just let it be perceived a little bit more in the sides. Like sometimes if you have something like this where it has a really subtle like click to it, it's not even a click, it's just got a little knock when it starts. Sometimes like if you've got really powerful like drums hitting in the center, then it's better to let these like more subtle little percussive elements kind of come through the sides more. Now obviously there's hi-hats and stuff in the sides, but they're quite high frequency, whereas this is kind of in the mid-range. So I let it like live in the sides where it had less to compete with, because the kick and the snare are just like, you know, just hitting pretty hard. So what else we got? Guitars plucked. Looks like I didn't do much to these. Nope, just took out the low frequencies. I mean, I feel like looking back, that could have used a bit more like verb or something, but it just sits in there. So I don't know. I kind of liked it dry. It sort of just gave it like this little bit of character, and it's a nice, clean take on the guitar. Like, it just sounds good. The tone is good. So I don't know. In a way, it's sort of like nice to just let it shine in that dry glory. The harp, hell yeah. Again, just really good sound selection. I think I just cut out, like, again, the extreme lows. I feel like the more I go through this project, the more I realize, like, Mihai does most of the work on the mixing. It's just great sound selection. Oh yeah, these happen very occasionally through the song. There wasn't really much to do with this. I also have Wider as a send. For people that don't know what a send is, it's like a channel that lives in its own little place, and you can send signals to it and it'll add effects there. It'll add this, it's like you send a channel to an effect and then it adds the effect that way. Whereas usually what you would do is put the effect directly on the channel. But sometimes if there's stuff where you know you're gonna add it to a lot of elements, it just makes sense to have it in its own place and just be like, send that to that, send this to that, send that to that. So I made this wider using the send, and I like having stereo imaging send, I suppose, because sometimes it's just quicker. Like if there's certain elements where I'm like, it's not like the high frequencies need to be wider. It's not that the low frequencies need to be wider or the mids. It just needs to be wider. And this is a really quick and easy way to deal with that. And I know it's going to be mono compatible. If you don't know what I'm talking about and you are actually a music producer and you give a shit, mono compatibility is important. You should go look somewhere else on YouTube or wherever and just find out what it's about. But if you want something that makes stuff sound wider and is still mono compatible, I totally recommend wider. It's free. So next, reversed reverb effects. Once again, I'm literally just cutting out low frequencies, adding this to NLS. So it looks like I am adding like little bits of saturation with the NLS, a little bit here and there, and they're all going to their own channels. Rhodes keys, let's have a listen. Now this is a more prominent element, so it needed a lot more treatment, I guess. So what I've done with it first and foremost is used Ozone Imager. And the reason I used Ozone Imager instead of wider is because this does let me choose, you know, should the high frequencies be more wide, should the middle frequencies not be wide, blah, 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 blah. And that's pretty much what I've done here. I actually boosted the high frequencies a lot. Like, I know a lot of people would really disapprove of me using this much of an increase, but I tested how it sounds in mono. It doesn't really kill it. The thing is, if you already have a signal that, like when it's in stereo, it sounds nice and bright, but then you put it into mono and it doesn't, you can try and save that brightness by doing a bunch of different things. But in this case, I was like, it still sounds good in the overall mix in mono. And so I don't really mind making that like high stereo information that's nice and bright and attacky even wider. It's already kind of lost, so that was my thinking for this. You've got a little bit of width on these frequencies. And I think that probably is because I know that I added some saturation to the bass to give it more prominence in this region. And I know the kick and the snare take up a lot in this region. So I kind of just wanted this nice, these chords almost sound like atmospheric, you know? But I kind of wanted this middle frequency to have more width so that it sounds more atmospheric to your ear, like it's more around you, I guess. And then these frequencies up here. Again, this is similar to what I was saying about that lead sound earlier. It has a little bit of a click to it. And because the kick drum and the snare have a lot of click in the center, it was like, let me just push that high frequency click out to the sides and just make it more audible. So it's not competing for space in the center, you know? Then again, I've tamed the sort of lower frequencies, taken them down actually like 4 dB, chopped out low frequencies. It's hard for me to explain why I do this. I like the sound of this slope, but I also want to know that below 100 hertz, there's definitely going to be like almost no bass frequencies. And I don't feel that safe with this. So like if I press play and actually watch this. Yeah, okay, fair enough. There's actually none there, but this is like a safety net for me. And I know I could do it like this, but I don't want to. Moving on, I need to plug my laptop in. So now here's why I also don't have many sends. Mihai had already chosen a lot of good send reverbs. As you can hear here, all I've done, once again, a little bit of NLS saturation and taking out any low frequencies just in case. Strings, bit of soothe, I sometimes find strings just have resonances. Like that. Now I've changed it and didn't really need to do that, but whatever. Again, cutting out low frequencies, a little bit of harshness here. Just didn't want it. Brass keys, again, made them nice and wide. These were also, you know, a main element, so the sound selection is so good, man. I just hope this goes to show that, like, when you select really good sounds, you do not need to mix that much. Like, you really don't. And I feel like it's worth mentioning something here. A lot of people talk about analog equipment, and I know Mihai uses a lot of analog stuff when he produces. People are like, oh, analog just has this sound. Like, analog just sounds right. When I make stuff with analog, it sounds so good. The reason for that is because analog gear, the sound designers are paid a lot of money, and they have some of the best sound designers. Like, they really know what a sound needs to have in order for it to be processed properly and to sit right in a mix and to sound warm and to sound cold and all of this kind of stuff. When I look at the output from like a drum machine, I can literally look at the waveform, and as a person who's been a sound designer for like 5 or 6 years now, I can look at the waveforms and be like, those are really well designed sounds. That will respond really well to distortion, that will respond really well to saturation or limiting, clipping. And that's just kind of why analog stuff sounds so good, because it's designed properly. It's not that there's like special circuitry. Take it from me, I have a electronics degree. I've got a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering and Electronics. There's not that much special stuff that happens in these circuits, I promise you. So I guess this is just a really good example of how, you know, analog stuff is just very well designed to sit right in a mix. So what did I do? I felt that the lows kind of were where they needed to be. You know, they're sitting in the sides a little bit. If you have your headphones on, you can hear that. These mids, I guess if I didn't have this on, very minimal difference. But then the highs, I feel you hear that, this little like with the filter every time that they hit the key, it's like, and to me, that's what I hear getting wider. And again, it's not a click like what I was talking about with the other elements, but it's like a kind of, it's like a signal for your ear that there's a new sound being played every time that kind of sort of sound happens. So again, I didn't want that competing with the center elements like the voice or the drums. So I pushed it out into the sides. Again, with Soothe, I really don't do much other than the default preset. In this one, I actually turned off this because I wanted it to catch resonances in the lows. I kind of just do this not because I'm not necessarily listening. And I know that sounds bad, but I know that later in the process, when I put distortion or saturation or whatever, just to bring things up a little bit and make them sound a little bit more warm and forward, all these little resonances are just gonna jump out. And honestly, when you saturate, I think like Soothe is really good for the way that I work anyway, like if you're using a bit of saturation later, because it'll pull down these little harsh resonances, and if you add just, a subtle amount of saturation to warm everything up, they kind of end up back where they were initially, but they haven't been made to like sound worse from the saturation. You know what I mean? So it's good. It is good, and I recommend doing that. I don't know why I've done this twice. Guess I felt I needed it. It really didn't though. Yep, there's that saturation I was talking about. Same thing. You can see on pretty much every channel I've used a little bit of Soothe, I've used a little bit of low cut. and then the NLS just to sum it all together. This here, there's a couple of reasons that I did this kind of slope. The first reason is what I said before. I didn't want that fundamental frequency to kind of like saturate too much. When you pull out kind of lower mid or upper bass frequencies, it makes stuff sound further away, and to my ear it sounded a bit up front. But additionally, what this does is, like, as the notes get lower, it kind of sounds quieter almost. You still have the texture of the sounds, because I haven't taken any high frequencies out of it. Now the thing is, it does get quieter as it plays these lower notes, but I kind of am emphasizing that by cutting out more of the low frequencies, because it doesn't spend all that time around there, you know, like from the start. It's up here. So that was my thinking with that. Again, soothe, and that's going, I've definitely pushed that up above what I usually would. I feel like every track it's just gonna be me being like, yeah, so I added soothe to this and a low cut, and that was that. Well, here we have some chorus outro chords. I think I've added that chorus pretty much because I wanted to do the same thing as before, like pushing the higher frequencies, the transients out into the sides. But there's already quite a lot of chorus on this, so I guess I just went for it with chorus. It's ensemble technically, so it's a bit more detuned. And it has this width switch, so pushed it a bit wider, put the amount all the way up. Now there's some automation here. And I guess, yeah, okay, so I remember where this comes in and it pulls out some of these higher frequencies up here. Which, I know that seems like almost nothing, but in the context, my bad. The thing is, when that like, kind of like, when that hit comes in on the synth, the sibilance in the voice where she's like, it's part of my, like, it was competing with that kind of sound in the synth. So I just pulled that down a lot until it sounded right. It's not too technical, but yeah, sometimes you just have to automate things on and off to leave space. And the rest of the song, it didn't need that. It's just when it was going alongside the vocal, it kind of did need it. But let's listen. So now I feel like it doesn't compete with the vocal there. Again, you can see soothe, it's not on as strong as it was. And I think I've added like different areas where I want it to take some frequencies out. You can hear what it's doing, what it's pulling out. It's not very much, but just stuff that doesn't need to be there. Once again, I seem to have done this just to be, I'm super careful when it comes to low frequencies. I don't want anything other than my kick and my bass in the low frequencies, so I really just love these low cuts. They're everywhere. Retro pad, all these sounds are really just so good. They didn't need that much. But the thing is, you know, these little things like adding that chorus there, adding that automation, it makes the difference. It's detailed work. And I guess if you can hear these sort of things, it's valuable. This I just made wider, these synth bells. Again, same as usual, low cut and soothe, and I've made it wider. With the send, what do we have here? I don't think I did anything to the synth fills other than cut out low frequencies. But you can see there, like that, like let's look on the spectrum. Okay, so it's not doing much. But you know, these frequencies are powerful. Although they don't seem to be very loud, they are powerful, and you just don't want them there. More of what I was talking about before, like a gentle slope, and then a kind of emergency slope to just make sure I have nothing below 100 hertz. Okay. I'm going to skip through all the ones where I haven't really done much, you know. I mean, the thing is, like, you listen to that and you're like, what does it need? Like, I mean, you listen to it in the mix. It does what it's supposed to be doing. It's not meant to be a forward element. It didn't need any adjustments. Same with this one, same slopes as before that I've kind of mentioned. It's like I just want the lower frequencies to kind of just sit in the back, bring them forward a little bit with this saturation. Now, I guess it's an important time to talk about sidechaining. Let's watch what happens when I play the track. So if I listen to these instruments, you should hear the effect of this. It's very subtle and, like, honestly, it's not that easy to hear, but a lot of songs, everyone talks about, what's that song? Call on Me by Eric Prydz, or like, no, it's One More Time by Daft Punk, where you can hear the whole song going like, you know, that's sidechaining. It's like the drum hits, everything else gets quieter for a second and then rushes back up. I don't like that effect unless I really want to hear it. And what I've done here is like just manually done it with an EQ. So if I show the automation, every time a kick drum hits, see, this is where I'm earning my money. It's not from it's not from just cutting out low frequencies and adding soothe. So basically, like, what I do here is, like, I'll actually look and be like, okay, when is the kick drum playing? Let's just highlight it. Be like, okay, so it's roughly like there. Go away, emojis. And then I'll scroll down and just be like, okay, let's get stuff the hell out of the way when the kick drum hits. From everything that's in, like, you know, everything below 271 hertz. I would usually say 250, but I guess I went a bit higher this time. And then the same thing for the snare. So what I've done here is, I think for the snare drum, every time it hits, same thing. It's like, yeah, I've just literally drawn in a drop here. And there's two tones. I assume that's because if I actually play the snare and look on an EQ, there's like a fundamental frequency. Let me just like actually find it with the EQ. So that's what, 156 hertz. And then I guess up here at 300, there's another one. I'm not sure exactly what I've done, but let's just take a look. 242 and yeah, 154. So I was off by 2 hertz. Not bad. But basically those are just getting pulled down every time the snare hits. I also have Track Spacer, which I totally recommend. And every time Luise, the vocalist, sings, all of the frequencies that she's singing are being pulled out of the instruments. So when she has a bit more like, you'll see like up here, like when there's more high frequencies, it pulls more high frequencies out of the instruments. But this is very subtle. And, you know, I wouldn't ever push that more than it needed to be, but essentially, like, all the instruments are now being balanced. Again, I have soothe, which is kind of just dealing with build up. you have this thing when you have a lot of sounds layered together that, you know, the waveforms will be going up and down at different rates, and sometimes like two tracks that have like harsh frequencies that are quite quiet can like combine to make it come over a certain level, and so I just like to put Soothe there to catch it. It's not something I would typically do manually, not anymore, because since Soothe got invented, it's like it really does the job. Sometimes it doesn't, and then I'll do it manually, but yeah, I prefer to like save my manual stuff for like things like sidechain, because I personally believe that's why the drums punch as well as they do, is because I really take the time to manually do the sidechain and do it right. I mean, there's other elements too, but it definitely helps a lot. So it's worth going over the bass a little bit. As you can see, I've got the exact same processing. So it's doing the same thing. Every time the kick drum hits, I'm turning down all the bass. Every time the snare drum hits, I'm turning down the fundamental frequencies of the snare drum. You could ask, why am I not turning down other frequencies? I didn't feel like I had to. There are times where I will turn down other frequencies because I just don't want them clashing, or I feel like, you know, especially if I'm mastering something and I really want it loud, maybe I'll be doing even more extreme sidechain, but that doesn't happen all that often these days. Let's take a look here. So you hear in solo, like the bass feels like it loses power sometimes because of the sidechain happening. Now, let me just turn the sidechain off and take a listen to what these are doing. This, I think, is just pulling out a resonance. Did I turn it off? It's one for headphones for sure. I guess, let's turn them all off and see how it sounds. With bass, I really want, I want to look at where the kick is. Yeah, so like in span, if I look at where the kick drum is hitting, that's what, like 80 to 100 hertz roughly. And then if I play the bass, you can see this is like a bit lower down, like 60, maybe 65. And it goes up to like 100, but then it's down here at like 40. That kind of works for me because they're not competing for the same frequency region. I'm obviously turning the bass down whenever the kick drum hits, so they're definitely not clashing. But I do genuinely believe that, like, if you don't have something happening in 100 or 80 hertz for the whole song, then that kick drum is really going to sound noticeable when it hits, because there's nothing else there. It's the same with the snare drum. If nothing else in the track is playing around like 200 hertz and then the snare just goes like, you really will notice it. But if there's something constantly playing like do do and then your snare goes, it's really not going to sound that powerful or unique. And fortunately Mihai is really good at arranging, and so it's like kind of a lot of the work is done. There's not really things that are competing with the bass, because he's just good at writing and he puts things in the right place. But I still prefer to like sidechain just to get extra clarity. However, what I've done basically with this is pull out stuff that's in that kind of region. I think I said like 80 to 100 hertz. It looks like there were some overtones that were happening, like, so there's like 85, 75. I just didn't want them there. I feel like if you clean up this kind of stuff, you might feel like you lose stuff initially, but again, that's why, you know, saturation, I have stuff like max bass happening later. This stuff really makes a difference, because although you're pulling out some of those upper harmonics in the bass, you're leaving in the lower ones. And then if you add saturation, it's going to bring in more harmonics based off of that lower one, and you're still going to hear it. For anyone who doesn't understand what I'm talking about, Google it. Anyway, that's about as much as I did for the bass, really. Didn't do that much. Added more saturation with this NLS channel, quite a lot actually, on mic mode, because it just sounds really good on bass. Okay, it looks like I did a lot more to the bass. I take that back. So it looks like what I've done is add max bass, and a lot of max bass. It's on full power at all of the low frequencies, as many of them as possible. Added some convolution. That gives it a little bit of stereo width. Let me turn it up all the way. And that's also because it had a bit of a click to it. It had a bit of an attack, and I didn't want it like competing with the kick drum in the center. I wanted to actually push that out to the sides. Once again, same thing. Wanted to just push that attack out. And again, because the kick and the snare are taking up a lot of these frequencies, maybe not the kick so much, but the snare for sure is taking up a lot of this range. Push that out to the side just a little bit, you know, to make it more audible. Now I've turned this up and it's automated. And I think it's basically when the bass changes note. Now this is one of the problems with analog. It's quite complicated, and I don't know, sometimes it sounds really good and sometimes the patches are well designed, but you just run into problems occasionally. I don't know what caused this problem necessarily, but I don't want the person who produced the song to have to think about it while they're producing. So I like to be able to fix this stuff afterwards. But you can see in the waveform, you can literally see that when it plays this part of the song with this note. Let me turn off the sidechain again. You can see that this note is big and fat, and then it moves to this note and it's not. So I have boosted this loads, like 8 dB, which is quite a lot. 3 dB is doubling it basically. So without, it's still audible to your ear, but it does not have as much bass. In fact, let's look on span one more time. So this has this nice fat bass going all the way up to like here. But then if I let it play to the next bit, where's that bass? Look how low down that is compared to where it was. And the thing is, because, I mean, even on these headphones, it's not totally obvious, but if someone's not listening on headphones, or even if you're listening on fairly okay speakers, you might not notice this, but I was working in a room with a big subwoofer, and it was like obvious. I think I had like a 15-inch subwoofer. It was so obvious as soon as that second note came in, the power was just not there anymore. So this was a pretty drastic boost, and it got the result in the end. Sometimes there's more complicated things you have to do, but yeah, I don't know what it was. Maybe just the patch on the gear. Maybe he didn't use analog gear for this. I assume he maybe did, but for whatever reason, the power was lost on that note, so I had to correct it. And I think that's throughout the whole song. There's actually a part where I guess I turned it down at the end. So let's move to the second bass real quick. This one was actually really nice, super warm bass, but it was warmer than the other one. By that I mean it just had this tone, this tonality to it, like different harmonics, different, I don't know, it just sounded nice. So I tried to treat it the exact same way I treated the other one. You know, it's got that little stereo separation thing going on. I think this is probably just me copy pasting, boosted the bass, but it looks like I've done the same thing here. I think this is more of a sawtooth waveform. We can actually zoom in and check, but it sounds like it to me. Yeah, you can see kinda. It's not a perfect saw, but you know, that is a pretty saw shape, like, you know? And it has a lot of powerful harmonics. That's why saws sound the way that they do. They have every harmonic, whereas other waves don't. Some of them have odd harmonics, some of them have even blah, blah, blah. Not important right now. But basically, it certainly looks different visually from this one. And that means we've got different frequencies to worry about. And I decided that I wanted those lower fundamental frequencies to be more powerful. So you can see here, the lowest one is getting a boost of about 3 dB. The rest of it is not. Then when we come here, it's getting boosted a lot. And even this upper harmonic is getting, well, second harmonic is getting boosted a fair bit too. It's pretty simple work, but it's detailed, you know, and it got the bass where it needed to be. And basically, I just try and push it to the, like I said with the drums at the start, I try and push it as far as I can, and then like no further. Like I don't want it to go any further, and then I'll kind of pull it back to where it needs to be. And then I'll sort of check with the artist and be like, what do you think? What do you think? Should it come further forward? It can. Should it come further backward? It can. It's just about having control at the end of the day. And I added this very subtle click. Again, that's because this didn't really have much of a click. It has a very tight, like, kind of thing, but the other bass had quite a prominent click, so I kind of just very subtly layered another one in and made it wide, probably with the exact same processing I've used on the other bass sound, without the max bass, obviously. Without it. It's incredibly subtle. I can hear it, but I didn't want it to be like really obvious that I'd done it. I just wanted, even if it's just like every third or fourth one where there's a moment of space, I just wanted that little knock to kind of like pull it forward, you know? Bass synth. Looks like I've just cut out the low frequencies. So yeah, this was more of a textural element, I felt. It didn't do much and it was quite quiet, so I didn't really change it much. Bass in the outro. I think I talked about this already, maybe? Yeah, I did. It was like the first thing I opened. Anyway, so here we have the low bass. What I've done here, Ozone Dynamics, I've just soloed everything below 165. How did I decide on 165? Honestly, I just was in the studio with the big subwoofer and that made the most sense. I just let the part play through and then I was like, that is probably the right area. I don't want to capture anything above that because what I'm going to do next is limit it a lot. This is a live bass and it sounds great, but the problem is that you can see on the waveform, it's different volumes here and there. There's a lot of like these initial transients, as we call them, like these initial clicks, and they're quite a lot louder than the rest of the tone. Sometimes you have like waves that look a bit fatter than others. And I kind of just wanted to shred off some of that, those peaks, I guess. Yeah, if you look at like these, they're just a bit quiet compared to the rest of it. So yeah, I limited it and now it's kind of all sitting in the same region. That can have some problems sometimes, but in this case, I think I've figured it out. And then this is just, again, the bass hasn't been touched really. I let these two, I don't know why I put it in two bands. I assume that, I think I remember actually, I compressed this band, like the mids, and Mihai didn't really care for it. He could hear it and he didn't want it, but I didn't compress the extreme highs because that let some more detail through, but in the end we just turned it off. Basically it's not letting any bass come through, but the bass that is coming through on this channel is like limited, so it's very, very controlled, which helps with live bass. Sometimes I will manually edit the bass and do all kinds of crazy automation. Probably show that in another video. But on this one, I didn't feel it needed it. I think there were some overtones, and I can see here I've used these dynamic bands, so like any time that these overtones get too loud, the EQ will switch on and pull them down, but the rest of the time when they're not playing, it's not going to pull those frequencies down at all. So I think my goal with this, as is often the case, like I said, I like to get everything as loud as possible. My goal with this was to really just make the live bass sound as powerful as the synth bass and the rest of it, because synths are just inherently powerful. And yeah, I did a lot of this to bring consistency, but also I really wanted to push it loud. And if you look here, you'll see that this actually does have a good bit of volume to it, but it's not as loud as the bass from earlier, as far as I'm aware. And when I showed it to Mihai, he was like, it's the outro. The subs don't have to hit as hard as the rest of the song. And I was like, that's correct. Like, I am also someone who writes songs, but I get caught up in the mixing stuff sometimes, and it's just like I just want it to be as big and as amazing as it can be. So to be honest, I learned a lot on this track just because there were decisions that I made, especially in the first version, where the drums were just like really loud. I think I kind of changed it to make it sound very like 80s and modern, but it sounded big, but either Mihai or the artist just weren't feeling it. And then some of the changes I'd made, I also had to work back with Mihai, and it taught me a lot. So I'm grateful for that. Now everything sits in the right place. Everything's nice, but I'd always prefer to try if I find a new vision for a mix, because sometimes it has worked. In fact, there was a track I did for Alessia Fantasy, also produced by Mihai, and that I gave it a slightly different feel than I think he was expecting, but he was like, damn, I didn't hear it this way, but it's really good. So sometimes it's worth just taking the risk and seeing if people respond well to it. So basically on the vocals, I really didn't do a lot. You can see they're all going to ascend. I'll explain that afterwards. Some room sound here, just to make this a little bit wider. These are just some chopped up vocal edits. They don't come in that often. But again, I just wanted them a little bit wider because they are percussive at points. And that kind of I just wanted to spread it out again so it's not competing with the drums in the center. Harmony vocals, I really haven't processed them. They didn't need a lot. And I say that as in I haven't processed the individual mixer track, but I did process the bus just slightly. So the bus, or the group as you call it in Ableton. Yep, I've cut out low frequencies using this SSL filter. I don't know why, I just like the SSL filter. It's a little bit smoother, especially on stuff like, vocals. It just worked. Then really just a lot of dynamic EQ, and this took a while. And I think this was all me. I don't know if I went over this with Mihai. There was some extreme highs that were coming through. Maybe, or did I just... No. Yeah, so sometimes I just like to cut out stuff that is basically just at the human hearing range capacity, so 22,000 kilohertz. But as you can see, there's very little coming through there anyway. And I noticed that there was kind of a steep peak on the frequency spectrum. So I sort of just I don't know what that was. So I just kind of took that down. Anyway, yeah, took out some extreme highs. And then here there's just little frequencies and resonances that came out in her sibilance. This can happen when you're recording with a microphone. Sometimes the person moves forward or backwards, which is normal. You get different frequencies sort of bouncing back off of your face and back to the microphone, and they create this very short delay, because sound does move very fast, but it is delayed. And when the sound hits the microphone, it creates, like, it pushes some frequencies up, it pulls other frequencies out. It's called comb filtering, and it's quite hard to get rid of, to be honest, but sometimes this is just the best way to kind of deal with it, is to just search for resonances. So it's like, most people can't hear this stuff, you know, where it's just like, this I can't hear here, but I'm willing to bet that there is a part of the song where it really, really gets pushed. Like if I push that up, ugh. And that's not the singer's fault. It's not the recording engineer's fault. There's just frequencies that get pulled out due to comb filtering when you're recording. And yeah, it is possible to get rid of it, but it takes a lot more than just putting a bit of sound foam around the microphone. Anyway, here, again, I wanted to protect these lower frequency harmonics. Again, I wanted to protect these harmonics from like being saturated too heavily later on in the process, and some of the upper harmonics too. I actually nowadays use the EQ, the vocal EQ by Antares, the auto-tune EQ. It does this job a lot better, I feel, but ProQ does a great job of this kind of stuff. Just, you know, there's parts of the song where these frequencies aren't that loud, so it won't turn them down at that point, and there's parts where it is loud, so it does turn them down. Anyway, lastly, I sent all of these to this, which is just parallel compression. And what I like about that is if you send everything to a compressor, you get this sort of extra channel which has like all of these instruments that you're hearing, aside from the drums, competing to try and win the compressor battle, I guess. Because the compressor is like trying to turn everything down. And what generally happens is the loudest element wins, and it sounds a lot louder than everything else. So as you go through the song, certain elements that are more forward just get an extra little bump, and it just kind of creates this overall like volume balance throughout the whole song. So like it doesn't sound like certain parts get quieter or other parts get louder. However, the downside is that when you have like your reverbs and your delays and sends printed and you try this, sometimes it just pulls the delays and reverbs up a lot, and you don't really want that. And that's what was happening here. So we didn't use this in the end. We tried it without the delays and reverbs going through here, and just eventually we were like, nah, just forget about it. It sounds good without it. So after that, all there is to talk about really is what's on the master bus. Obviously, this is the NLS thing that groups all of the NLS channel strip things together. And I've added a little bit of drive, 0.6, added more drive on the drums, 2.4. So like I say, saturation. I really like to add a lot of saturation. 2.4 is enough that it could start to be noticeable if you hadn't done all of the stuff I've done earlier with Soothe and Dynamic EQ. Max Bass to really just like, at this point I've used Max Bass on a lot of the other elements. This just kind of like makes everything sound a little bit fatter, and it makes everything sound nicer on smaller phone speakers. That's really what Max Bass is for. I use it for, you know, boosting bass a little, but that's kind of the purpose of it. Then Pro Q3 to pull out some low frequencies in the sides. The kick drum had some stereo information. I don't know why, but I didn't want it in there. Same with the bass and all of this stuff. I would rather these lower frequencies happen in the middle. That's pretty common. So this is just how I go about it. There's other ways to do it, but yeah. Then I did a tiny bit of clipping. As you can see, it's not a lot. See these red things coming off the top? It's just like how much is being clipped from the signal. But you know, I pushed those drums really hard earlier. So what I wanted to do was set this clipper to a point where every time a drum hits, it's clipping it, even on the quietest drum hit. And that just means that they're all level. And when we sent this for mastering, the guy was like, did you use a limiter on this? And I was like, I did not, but I did clip all of the drums. This can also just happen because, you know, even though there's some sidechaining happening, I'm not sidechaining the whole spectrum. I'm just sidechaining the bass when the kick drum hits. So it can actually like add to the volume a little bit when the drums hit. And some parts, like if the vocal is playing and the vocal's very loud, that volume combined with just the click of the drum is going to actually push it a little bit louder. So the clipper is there to kind of just level out all the drum hits, and that makes it a little bit easier for the mastering engineer later. So yeah, that's basically what I did. And I really like this song. It's a vibe. Go stream it. It is called Listen to Your Inner Voice by Luise. And it's just, yeah, phenomenal work. So I'm going to play it and vibe to it, and that's all. Thanks for watching. Hope everyone enjoyed it.
Listen to your inner voice.
Nah, much appreciated. You know, the usual shit, like and subscribe, whatever. I don't really care. I'm not trying to build a following necessarily. I just wanted to like give some info back to people that follow me and support and whatever. So here you go. Much appreciated. Don't know why I did that, but I did it, so who cares?